Thank you for viewing the Voices of September 11th video series. It's a series that we have a great amount of pride with at Public Safety Training Consultants. My name is Kevin Willett. I'm the instructional coordinator at PSTC, and on behalf of the entire PSTC family, I want to thank you for taking a look here. I'm going to turn it over shortly to Diane Dwyer. Diane Dwyer is an anchor here in the San Francisco Bay Area with NBC News, and an anchor that we very much trust. She's done some stories on dispatchers in the past, and she's also hosted our annual Dispatch Awards dinner, so we trust her, and she's a lot easier to look at than I am, and we'll do it much more professionally. I did want to give you a little bit of background on the 911 Cares project. September 11th was a day that obviously changed the world, and for PSTC, that's no different. We had instructors that were flying to different places, and that included myself and another instructor, Richard Baer. We were heading to Tennessee to handle a conference when our various flights were grounded, mine in Detroit and Richard's in Chicago, and we then learned of what happened. We were safe on the ground, and very quickly we got together and tried to figure out a way where we could appreciate and provide some kind of emotional support for all the dispatchers of September 11th. We started making phone calls to those centers, and as you would all expect, the support hadn't started yet. We were some of the first people that provided that emotional and appreciation support. We asked the profession, you, to help chip in, and everybody, starting with the Tennessee Emergency Number Association Conference, chipped in either money, gifts, cards, letters, drawings, and all those were filtered to our office, where we then disseminated to all the different dispatch centers of September 11th. The 911 Cares project has been one of support and appreciation, and you've played a big part in that. Some of the support that we provided to the dispatchers after the September 11th attacks included a concert in Washington, D.C., and we got over 300 tickets donated from Clear Channel Communications, and all the dispatchers and some of their families were able to attend, and it was a wonderful thing that we were really thrilled to coordinate. In New York City, thanks to the Marriott Corporation and a lot of companies that helped us out, we were able to do a reception in Brooklyn for all the 911 dispatchers, and it was an amazing project that we were able to get everyone together for. There's some special people that we want to acknowledge as part of the Voices of September 11th team. We met them through this process, and they've been incredibly supportive of the 911 Cares and of these Voices of September 11th video. They include Steve Souter. Steve was the manager of the Arlington County 911 Center in Washington, D.C. area, and he has been a huge support to us. Sergeant Jim Butler with the New York Police Department has also coordinated our efforts into the New York Police Department, as has Stephen Gregory with the New York Fire Department and the Alarm Dispatchers Union. Chuck Dowd with New York PD has been a huge help to us, and we want to thank all of those people. You're going to get the opportunity to see some of them on videotape, and they also include some line-level dispatchers, just like you and me. Jimmy Raftery, who truly taught us the meaning of the brotherhood that we would hear about in New York. Joe Epstein, who now we call Epi, who helped us out with meeting some of the different dispatchers. And then John Shaw, that you will meet, who took the wireless 911 call from Flight 93. These and all of the people that we interviewed absolutely gave of their time freely and were fantastic interviews. I hope that you gain as much as we did from them. As you can tell, I'm very much more comfortable behind the microphone instead of in front of the camera. And behind the camera right now is a guy named Steve Krause. He has been with us on this project from the first day, shooting video, helping with the editing, and doing all the work that makes it look the way that you are about to see a wonderful video, and I can't thank him enough. Other people on the PSTC team, including people that went out to New York and Washington, D.C. and Pennsylvania with me, as well as people that helped out with the receptions and different appreciation events that we helped and shipping stuff all over the country, include Tracy Deichman, Janet Childs, Richard Baer, Stacy Stauffer, David Larton, and Perrin Larton, his wife, who is kind of our pit boss. When something breaks down, she's the one to fix it. So thanks to all those people and anybody that had anything to do with this project. We also want you to remember to take a look at our website, because there's going to be ongoing updates to this project, and that will include everything we do for the region. There's a 911 Cares button from our website that will explain everything, and that includes the appreciation, the recognition, and this video series. All those things can be viewed there. I'm going to turn it over to Diane Dwyer now, and she'll take you through the rest of the video. Thank you on behalf of PSTC and all of its employees and families.
Thanks, Kevin. Since the attacks of September 11, 2001, the world has witnessed countless acts of bravery, heroics, and the spirit of firefighters, police officers, and emergency medical responders in the cities and towns that were attacked. These responses were well chronicled by the local and national media. 911 communications professionals, such as the ones behind me, though, are often the unseen, unrecognized, and underappreciated responder of the public safety family. As a country, we have heard little of their response on September 11th. This Voices of September 11th video set will document the amazing stories of many of the more than 2,500 911 communications professionals who worked in New York, Pennsylvania, the Pentagon, and all of their neighboring dispatch centers. Call takers and dispatchers often refer to their responders. Dispatchers take pride knowing that they were the calm and professional voices that responders depended on that day. 911 professionals truly were the voices of September 11th. That voice responded to the needs of the nation. The dispatchers you'll meet during this video were thrust into America's history book on a day we'll never forget. None of them asked for recognition, and few accept the term hero, though they surely deserve it. We know you'll hear the true heartbeat of America in the courage, compassion, and empathy that is shared in the personal and professional stories of the various communication centers. If you're a 911 professional, after viewing this video, we hope that you'll sit a bit taller and take great pride the next time you say, "I am the voice of 911. And for those of you viewing this tape who are not public safety dispatchers, we hope that this video brings an understanding of what 911 professionals do. We hope you hear the caring voice, that you understand their quick thinking and empathize with the emotion they invest in every call, whether it comes via a 911 phone call or a radio. We doubt you'll ever just say again, just a dispatcher. All of the caring individuals you'll soon meet volunteered to be interviewed, and we thank them and their respective agencies or unions for their cooperation. We also thank all of the many dispatchers we were unable to meet and know that their voice was vital as well. The family of public safety training consultants and 911 Cares now invite you to join us for this very special documentary, The Voices of September 11th. At 8:47 a.m., as the New York 911 professionals gathered for their annual recognition event, American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767 with 92 passengers and crew on board, crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Immediately, calls of the crash were received at the New York City 911 Center, the two Port Authority dispatch centers, and the Jersey City Dispatch Center. Moments later, every dispatch center in the region was quickly overwhelmed. The personal stories of these dispatchers are each different. Some were on duty while others were at home on their days off or sleeping after just completing a shift. Each responded in their own way. Here are the personal stories of the many voices of September 11th.
At any given time, there could be 50,000 people working in the buildings. And then at the time of the day that it was, there's a lot of people commuting to work, and there's a lot of people that go through the building that don't work in the building, but they go through there because of all the subway lines and the PATH trains that run into the World Trade Center. The Trade Center was made up of several buildings. There's actually 7 buildings altogether in the complex, 1 through 7. 1 and 2 were the towers. Number 3 is the hotel. 4 was where the commodities exchange was. 5 World Trade is where the police desk was.
We are assigned to the Field Communications Unit, and we work out of a firehouse. Any second alarm or a 1060 or an emergency fire in the subway system, an airport disaster, whatever, they call us out, and we control the radios. We also set up the command post, so when the chiefs and other officers come into the scene there, we work with the chiefs that are in charge, the incident commander, and then from there we just work out the radio system. There are 2 guys assigned to the field comm unit. One guy works the radios inside the apparatus, and the other guy goes out with the officer and works at the command post.
And we were in downtown Manhattan. We were on 6th Avenue and West 11th Street. When all of a sudden I heard the people gasp, and they were all looking up. I turned around and I noticed that there was a hole in the World Trade Center. Obviously something very large had penetrated. I didn't see anything sticking out, and at that particular time there really wasn't any fire.
It was clear. It was about 85 degrees that day. It was beautiful, no clouds. And I was working Manhattan Radio, Zone 5 and 6. And I went on break from 8:30 to 9 o'clock. That was my break.
I just worked a midnight shift, got off 6 in the morning, and I guess somewhere around 9 o'clock in the morning my phone's ringing, and it was my brother. And he was saying, "Are you watching TV? Turn on the TV." And I'm turning on the TV, and I said, "What channel?" He said, "It doesn't matter."
That day I was working with a sergeant, my chief, 2 detectives, and 2 to 3 patrolmen on the road, and myself. I'm the only dispatcher during the day. I work, like I said, 8 to 4. Had the TV on, the news, and when the first plane struck, I was watching the local channel. I was not watching the TV screen, but I heard the reporter just scream and yell to his camera crew, the men in the studio, and they cut to I look up and they show the Trade Center, the 1 tower is on fire. And there's debris falling, and I yell into my sergeant to come in the radio room. He was still in the building, and I said, "You got to see this. It looks like a plane just struck the Trade Center, the tower, 1 tower." And we're watching it, and we just could not believe what just happened. We just figured it was a plane just crashed. We never expected anything else.
Heard a noise, but wasn't sure what it was. And next thing you know, my desk faces a door, which exits out into like the concourse of Building 5. I noticed all these people started running past the door. Next thing you know, the phone bank, which I have like maybe 5 or 6 phone lines, all lit up simultaneously. Then the radio started cackling, words coming over that there was possibly a small Cessna plane hitting the One World Trade Center.
Myself and Tyrone Connell, who had just come out of training for radio school, were joking around. He's like, "Well, Jimmy, do you want to take the radio?" I'm like, "No, you just got out of radio school. Sit your butt down and pay your dues." And about 15 minutes after that, the first call came over the radio. I believe it was Engine Company 6, called in, just Manhattan, transmit a second alarm. We just had a plane hit the Trade Center. The first thought and first words that ran out of my mouth were, "No way. Somebody's messing with us. This isn't happening." Then the alarm box 8087 was transmitted from the lobby of number 2 World Trade. Then the voice alarm, which is a intercom system between our office and the firehouses from Engine Company and Ladder Company 10, directly across the street from the Trade Center, started going off.
We got a call of an aircraft that hit the towers. And we were like, oh, it's one of those helicopters or charter planes, until these other calls started coming in of people saying there's smoke, there's fire, they're trapped. And it simmered down until the second plane hit. Then it was all chaos. People were calling. I had a lady call saying that there's no stairs. And she was on the 87th floor, I believe it was. And at that point, I didn't know what to say. There was no way to get to her. And she was crying on the line, on the phone. And I got very sentimental at that point. All of a sudden, the line died. And the second call I got was people untie the train stations, trapped, unable to get out, asking what can they do, are they gonna die? And that question really hit me hard. How do you tell somebody, I don't know, I can't help you at this point, you're trapped, I can't get to you. My first thing that I really wanted to do was leave the center and go straight down to where the World Trade Center happened.
We've had a couple of other emergencies where we had to stay for a long time, days at a time. So I got a couple of days clothing together, got everything ready, waited for the call. I knew they were busy, I didn't want to call them. They called me and they said they're calling everybody in. I said, okay, is there anybody else I can bring? And they said, another partner of mine, she has no transportation. I said, I'll go get her. And we came in, we had to go through the side streets of Brooklyn to get here. And it was a terrible, terrible sight. We could see the building. We could see everything on the building, the smoke, the thing. Everybody was in panic mode. Streets, you couldn't get through the streets. I was out there driving up on the sidewalk and onto oncoming traffic. We did everything we possibly could to get here. And we got as close as we possibly could. We got as close as Flatbush Avenue, and we had to stop there. And we just saw dust-covered people just streaming over the bridge. They had no idea who they were, where they were going. They were just in the thing. And the streets are all dust on our side and the Brooklyn side. The smell was atrocious. And from there we walked, it's only a short walk from Flatbush Avenue to our building. And then everybody was assigned different duties and to see if we can get things running as smoothly as possible. I think everybody that was up there that day really worked so hard and they did a very good job.
We're driving along and people are just pulling off left and right and they're looking towards the Trade Center. And they're just like amazed at what they're seeing. And we finally get to a point en route at the foot of the Triborough Bridge, and it was like blocked off, and it took us like 30 minutes to go 10 feet. And if it wasn't for my badge, we would not get over the bridge. They would not let us over. And you know, we pull up, and the highway patrol officer's like, "You're not going any further." And I'm like, "Look at the badge, we have to get in." And he said, "Okay, go." And we were sitting in traffic, and around us there were like about 7 cars. And everybody in those 7 cars was either a police officer, firefighter, somebody who had to get into the city. We have to go to work.
We set up our operations, our command board, which has chips that have fire apparatus numbers on it so we can keep track of everybody. Assign everybody a certain radio frequency to work on.
Manhattan to field come. And 6 trucks and 3 battalions are responding for various staging points. Are you ready to write the identities?
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
All right, you're going to get engine 258, 259, 325, 262, 312, 261, 260, engine 68, 35, 50, 64, 94, and 83. I gave you 3 chiefs, the 45, the 46, and the 49. I owe you 7 more engines. We're in the process.
All right, Manhattan, thank you very much.
And for that box will be 2033, Steve.
That day I was working myself and this another fire alarm dispatcher, John Traverso, and the officer was Gary Gates, who was a lieutenant in the fire service. And we set up our operation. I was the runner between the vehicle and the command post, and so I was giving them information off the radio to the chiefs that were at the scene.
South Tower came down first, and all we hear is people screaming on the radio that they're trapped, and that the tower came down, and there's, and there's not much we can do. We have everybody who we can send is there, and everybody, all other agencies are facing the same problems we are. Their people are trapped. There's no one to send.
It was right before Building 2 went down, but at this point, didn't know that Building 2 went down. The lights flicking on in the desk, the radio console went out, the lights went out, everything went out, lost all the power. And then we heard a lot of woof, and next thing you know, it was like a freight train was coming our way. And I guess it was, we dove underneath the desk, and we stayed there. And after the shock wave came through, it was nothing but dust and smoke. Most of the shock wave went below us, which we're one level up on the street level, and below us is the concourse. So when Building 2 collapsed, and at this point, still didn't know that was Building 2. We're still in the building and not knowing that what happened.
We were getting calls for all kinds of things. The first one I recall off the top of my head was there was a man down on the roof of the Marriott Hotel. And from hindsight, I could probably imagine now that was either someone that fell out of one of the buildings or out of one of the planes. But at the time, I didn't know what it was, just that there was a man down on the roof, and dispatched 2 of the officers to go over there.
I was driving families of firefighters to funerals and to Ground Zero for about 8 weeks. And that was emotional, because I would take mothers and fathers and wives and girlfriends and sisters, and they said, this is where my son is, or my husband's. And that was, I had a lot of guys who know me said down there, my nickname, they call me Epi. He says, Epi, I'd rather be on the pile than what you're doing, taking those families in a van. And just supporting them and holding them, and they would bring flowers and bears and cards. And like I said, I did that for 8 weeks, but I had to stop, after a while. It took its toll on me.
Our focus was to set up for an extended operation as part of the search and rescue team. We tried to give some aid and support to anybody that was injured in our immediate vicinity. Washed out a lot of eyes. Firefighters, civilians, EMS workers, anybody that came by, everybody needed their eyes washed out. So we did that, waited for all our equipment to arrive. We set up basically a tent city and a base of operation, including rescue tools, medical equipment. New York City has a combination team between the police department, fire department, and EMS. And we work together to try and penetrate the collapse and see if there's any survivors and get them out.
I gave a note to Chief Gansey, and at that time, when I gave him the note, I heard a boom. I looked up, and the second plane had hit the tower. Hit the second tower. The companies that were assigned on the 5th alarm were coming in and staging behind us in the parking garage. So when the second plane had hit, we all ran into the parking garage, down to the bottom of the parking garage, made a left turn up the stairwell, and into a building that led out to a courtyard. But we were all trapped in this particular area because the door was locked, so we couldn't get out. So now the lights have gone out, and there's dust now. We're starting to come into the parking garage and where we were. There must have been about, I would say safely, anywhere between 50 to 60 guys in there. And we finally forced the door. We finally got into this courtyard. There was so much dust and debris falling all over the place. We ran towards the river, and we were mingling around out there, getting our act together and this and that. And I know guys are okay because I could hear them over our portable radios. And I guess it must have been a good half hour, 45 minutes later, I hear a crack. I turn around, I look up, and half the towers are starting to come down. And as I ran along the river, the Hudson River, I wanted to bail out into the river because there's the only place to go because the dust cloud was coming right at us. And I kept on running as far as I can go. And I got to the end, and there was a ferry boat that was coming in. And this guy that was piloting the ferry boat nosed the boat right in there. We started taking people and throwing them into the ferry boat. Next thing I know, two guys grabbed the back of my pants and threw me into the ferry boat, and I bounced like a rubber ball. So got into the ferry boat and ended up in Hoboken, Jersey.
I remember it just happened to be most of the people that I spoke to, like I said, were women. Just frantic, God help me, there's fire above and below, and I basically just tried to tell them to stay calm, that we would try to get to them. And we were just relaying the information by computer to Manhattan. We couldn't even get through on our in-house phones. And then I just kind of put that aside and did what we had to do, you know, with dealing with the radio in our own borough. And the only other thing was when the first tower started coming down, 2 units from Manhattan, I guess, couldn't get through and switched to Queens and came over my radio with an urgent that they were getting hit with debris under the walkway. And I basically said, we'll try to get you help, give me your location. West and then static, and that was it. So that's another thing that I'll always remember. You know, we did the best we could.
Bravo Command Center, we have firefighters from 4 engine responding to the location, all 3 members. You have members trapped on the west side of tower number 1. We believe it's Captain Fuentes. He's unable to give us his exact location. Reported to be several members trapped. Do you have that message and copy it?
10-4 Manhattan, I got it. I relayed it to Chief Blake. He was on his way up with several members, okay?
All right, 10-4.
It starts to calm down a little bit. The North Tower comes down. And that's when we realize we have no idea who we've lost, who we still have, what vehicles or personnel are saved from the collapse. And we have to wait. And all you hear is screams on the radio from people who are trapped. And it took a long time before we finally had everything straightened out.
We went out, the Borders bookstore was open. We went out through that way and walked through the Borders and exited out into Church and Vesey Street. At that point, it was something like out of the Twilight Zone. It was like just raining debris, not debris, but like snow, but all the pulverized building materials. Walked by the captain's car. I don't know, from there, some piece of big debris fell on his car. I mean, just crushed his car. Like it was, you know, just something that you saw in a movie.
And a lot of us really thought we were next because, you know, what would you do? I mean, if you want to terrorist, you want to do something, you knock out the nerve center. We connect everybody, police, fire, EMS, everybody that connected by us. We contact every division, housing, you know, buildings department, everything. And so we felt like we were going to be next. And we all stayed there. Nobody, not a supervisor, principal, nobody tried to leave there.
When I came back and forth from the command post, the first thing I noticed was people jumping off the building. People coming out of the 100th floor, 105 floor, and that caught my eye. Of course, I stopped what I was doing and dropped my clipboard. And I can see this guy, I can hear this individual that jumped out the window. And at that altitude where he came out of, he was doing about 120 miles an hour before he stopped.
So we were on Church and Vesey Street. We decided to walk north. We walked north on Vesey to Murray Street, which is like 2 blocks over. Make the left, go down Murray to West Street. Now the sun comes out and we're standing at the corner, and everybody's like rushing. And I'm looking up, and then I see a woman falling to her death. I mean, I just see one of the jumpers come down. And we're watching, and next thing you know, we're looking up at the antenna, and the antenna starts to waver. And then the building just started to collapse. So at this point, we just turned around and started running north because that cloud was following us right up the street. And it was something like, you know, it's out of a Godzilla movie.
I remember where I was when I heard the first tower fell. I was a couple blocks from dispatch, and I'm sitting in my car waiting for the light to turn. And, you know, being a dispatcher, and I volunteered on some fire departments, and I've done some stuff. So when there's a fire, you know, you put the fire out and it gets done, and hopefully no one gets hurt and nothing's damaged, but you get through it. But when I heard that there was one tower down, it kind of really hit you and really made you realize that this was something bigger than just a fire, just, some people that were unfortunately going to be killed or whatever. It was something really big. And, it takes a little while to really sink in and understand what's really happening. And I got in here and the whole place was a buzz. They had, OEM here, people from the police department, from all the different agencies are all milling around. And came down here and I went on the radio. And the person that was on the radio was like a backup, helping to keep track of what was going on. And we had some units that were down there. And so they were filling us in, bit by bit, letting us know what's happening.
Battalion 3 from Deputy 1. Battalion 3 from Deputy 1. All your members accounted for. Deputy 1 from Battalion 3. That's affirmative. I have all JCFD personnel on my location. Very safe.
But the weirdest thing was that we didn't have a TV in here, we didn't have a radio in here, and it was just down the hallway that OEM had their big communication center all set up. And we were trying to get information that was leaking into us little by little. But other than that, we were kind of enclosed in our office and didn't really know what was happening. So we're, fishing for information. And then one of the battalion chiefs that was in New York was saying that they were running because the other tower was collapsing. They were saying that the chief's truck was still down there and they thought maybe it was in the collapse zone. And
Battalion 3 to dispatch, situational updates. We're currently about 6 to 8 blocks north of the towers. We can't see anything. We have abandoned both of our vehicles. We're currently in a defensive posture waiting 6 Alpha. Receive Battalion 3.
In the meantime, I started getting phone calls from several parents in town of their kids. And it really wasn't that crazy until the second plane struck. When the second plane struck, at that time we knew something. There's no way 2 planes can strike the 2 towers in one day. And that's when my chief came in and said, let's call in all the guys. There's something wrong. So that's when we also found out the Pentagon and the other plane.
I sat for about 3 hours before I got up because my friend, she couldn't take it. So I sat for her. And when I got a break, I went outside because I'm a kind of person where, I have to see it. I knew what was going on. So I went outside. It had to be like 300 cops in the street. And they were on the roof with guns. And that's when I got scared because I said, this is crazier than I thought. And then I looked to the corner and I saw people walking by. They were coming all over the bridges and they were covered in white dust. They were all it looked like they were walking ghosts. They weren't talking. They were just walking slow, coming, and you seen like an exodus, lines and lines and lines of people covered in ash, just walking, like they had nowhere to go. They were just walking, coming out of Manhattan. And I stood there for a long time, and I just looked at them. And then, some of the PCTs, they had water or something, they gave it to them as they were walking, but it looked weird. Then when I went back inside and sat down again, they hit the Pentagon. And then I said, okay, we next.
2 of the officers were up on 33rd Street in Manhattan, which is where our train line ends. Do you want us to respond? So I said, sent them down there. How, they don't have a vehicle. They go because we travel by train. And I just told them, whatever way you have to get there, get there. And that was the day commandeered a cab and got down there. And those 2 officers went in and only one of them came out. And out of the 22 people that were on the roll call that day, 19 people went into the building that I started working with that day, and only 6 came out.
Joe's brother Mike was the supervisor that had come on for the PM shift. And Matt was getting ready to go home, the AM supervisor. And Matt got called back in because Mike had gotten a call that they thought that his brother was in the hospital. And, he ran out of here to find out what was going on. So when I couldn't get home because the road was closed, and I came back in this office and saw the wrong supervisor there, and then I heard the story, that just made it worse. Because, you have somebody who's had to deal with all the events of the day, and had to see it all on TV and hear it on the radio, and then to come into work and find out that your brother might be in the hospital and not know what condition he was in, and then try and get through the mass confusion and the chaos to get to him. it made it 10 times worse to think about, because you don't wish something like that on anybody, to have to find out and deal with both in one day.
I was looking out at Belvedere Castle, which is just above the office in the park, and I was looking up at the flagpole, and the flag was hanging upside down, flapping in the breeze. And for anyone that knows anything about the way the flag should be displayed, it should only be displayed upside down when the ship or whatever is in distress. And I think that spoke volumes right there. America is in distress right now.
The captain of Rescue 1, who I had known, I just became actually friends with him in the 3 years I was in Manhattan, that he was working that day. So right then and there I knew he was gone. And in fact, the next night I went to Manhattan, the first thing they said to me was Terry was gone, which is Terry Hatton. I said, yeah, I know.
He says, do you have a dispatcher 818? And of course I had no one who dispatcher 818 was Tyrone Connell. Now Tyrone Connell, basically, I had mentioned before, was his first day at a radio school since he was back, and he was actually on the radio that day. He says, you know, I want to just tell you something. You know, we were trapped in the Millennium Hotel, and we called the fire department, and dispatcher 818 answered the phone. And we had 25 people there, and the guy got all the information. He stayed on the phone with us, and eventually people came and they helped us, and we actually were evacuated from the building. And this was, you know, after the collapse.
So I turned the TV on while I still had her on the phone, and that was right after the first plane hit the World Trade Center. And you know, it was like I had to shake the clouds out of my head. I couldn't believe, this must be a movie. I couldn't believe that this was really going on. And while I was talking to her, the second plane hit the second tower. After I got off the phone with her and I'm watching what's going on at the World Trade Center, then I heard about the plane into the Pentagon. And my first thought was, I got to get to work.
We're watching it live when the second plane hit. And of course comments were made around the room to the effect that, you know, God, what they're going through, the resources they're trying to pull, and that could be us. And then within a few minutes, it was us.
So as we were wondering aloud whether we might be in someone's crosshairs as a target, we then heard the roar of an airplane. And the Arlington County 911 Center is situated on a flight path into Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. So the sounds of aircraft both taking off and approaching Washington are not unusual to us at all. We hear them all the time. But the sound of this plane was like no other sound that we had ever heard. You could just listen to it and knew that it was going faster than planes normally either take off from or land at National Airport.
One of the motor officers came up and said that he had not seen an impact, but was seeing a lot of thick black smoke.
And we heard this roar go overhead, and then the very, very first call that we received, within 10 seconds after that, was from an Arlington County police officer who was on patrol and who very calmly picked up his microphone in his vehicle and reported that an American Airlines plane had just flew over his head and struck the Pentagon.
I saw that the Pentagon had been hit, and my husband, I knew from where he called me, he was just minutes away from the Pentagon, and so I knew he would be down there. And as it turned out, he was very close to the Pentagon, and he's a motorman, so the plane that struck the Pentagon flew right over his head, about maybe 100 feet above his head. He could clearly see what the name of the plane was and reflections of the street he was on.
Then, of course, all of the world saw the second plane deliberately hit. And myself, the folks in the Arlington County 911 Center, and in fact the world knew that they had witnessed the world change before its very eyes.
We were getting reports that there was another aircraft with an unidentified destination. We had no clue where it was headed. And I remember having to tone multiple times to try to get people to back away from the building, and there were officers that were down there that were still, you know, helping get victims away, helping people evacuate from the building.
Driving in, everybody else was leaving. There was a few cars. When I had the radio on, I know that Washington, D.C. was doing their all call for police and firefighters. the same as Arlington and other local jurisdictions. And there was a lot of people with their hazard lights on, and you can see their uniforms hanging in the window going our way, but there was a lot more people going west out of here. And once I got into Arlington County, a lot of the streets were blocked, and you had to have your ID to get through. And actually walking up to the front doors of the communications center and seeing 2 armed guards with M16s was kind of a little stunning, as I've never seen anything like that before walking into work. But from then on, the whole day was just about doing your job, answering the phone, answering questions, doing the best you could for people.
They were hearing that they were going to attempt to do something to the White House. So of course everyone's on more alert. We were kind of calm, but we were a little nervous and concerned. Then that was when we did find out, in fact, that it was the Pentagon.
But I have been to the Pentagon, and I personally had a friend who was working there on the day that it happened, and he had just decided to go get a donut and coffee, and he left, praise God, and it hit his office. So he was really out of the building at the time. So I had a real concern for a friend.
It was just a normal, routine, sort of a quiet morning. And one of our police officers here in the borough, I believe that's who called up and asked us if we heard about a plane hitting the World Trade Center. And we didn't hear anything about it, so we had turned the TV on since it was quiet, and we started watching the news footage of the World Trade Center attacks.
First of all, for anybody prior to Flight 93, if anybody would tell us, I mean, sure, an airplane can get down anywhere. Anywhere in the world, you know, it's possible. If you would have asked anybody here about a plane coming down, yeah, okay, you know, it's not going to happen here. Well, it did happen here. Connection-wise, first of all, to start out with it, you know, here we are, Westmoreland County. I took the call from Flight 93. Reference connections, the Pentagon. My uncle actually works at the Pentagon. The only reason he wasn't at the Pentagon that moment is because he was picking up material at another job site. He did have a crew at the Pentagon. Shanksville, where the plane went down, my aunt actually lives 1.2 miles from where the plane went down.
We really didn't have any warning prior to the crash of Flight 93 that you know, a plane was even flying around this area, to the best of my knowledge. And you know, so we're watching what's going on, and we just watched the first tower collapse on TV when all of a sudden our 911 lines just started ringing off the hook. So everybody that was in the center was grabbing phones, and people were telling us about this plane that crashed.
The phone started ringing. I guess wherever he was behind me, the person wasn't at their desk, they were on break. And John just randomly picked up the phone. I was still getting my stuff together, and I hear him say something to the effect, "You're on a plane that's being hijacked," and he's repeating what the guy's saying. And I just remember thinking to myself, and I'm sure anyone who does this line of work, you kind of get a little bit leery of some calls, you know what I'm saying? And I just remember thinking, well, this is when all the nuts in the county are going to call and make up some stories. And well, I heard John asking all the questions, saw the supervisor get involved in the call and listening in. And he got off the call and said, "I lost him." And I turned around and was just getting ready to say something smart, you know, like, oh, here we go with the kooky phone calls. And I saw John's face, and he was just white.
The phone call itself wasn't very long. I think it was under a minute, long enough for me. There was no doubt in my mind, absolutely none. As soon as I answered the phone, you could just hear it. You knew. Definitely not a prank call. No, I never second guessed it to whether it was, legit or not. I knew.
By 11 o'clock, we had phone calls from the FBI wanting to take custody of the tape for investigative purposes, which we facilitated with them. And as any agency that we get, they came in and signed the documents that we provide to them to take possession of the tape as evidence.
So, you know, the second day, the day after the crash, I worked my shift here and then went out there for 8 hours. So we did get to spend a lot of time out there, and it was just the first couple days before the ATF and everybody got in there to clean up. There was the debris field and everything, and it was really sort of spooky, especially at nighttime. You're sitting on the hill looking down into the field, and there's just debris everywhere, and it was just sort of eerie knowing that what happened and how many people lost their lives that day and everything.
Well, I write, when the mood sets me. When there's something that I need to be said, or that needs to be said, that's the first thing I can do. Is I can just put it into words a lot faster. That just comes right from my heart. And it was just, I wanted to say something to the so many people and rescue workers that lost their lives, and how everybody else just came together. Those words that I wrote were just part of the feeling that I had inside, and I just wanted to let it out. As we gaze across the nation, a broken flag is in our hand. Senseless murders, devastation, bearing down on our great land. Freedom comes at such a cost, from buildings burned to lives we lost. Although our hearts are in such pain, terrorism will not reign. Race, religion, old and young, come together now as one. Through all the smoke, ash, and debris, a bird emerges for all to see. Unbroken wings spread out so long to seek out those who did us wrong. Piercing eyes absorb the mess, taking in the sorrow and death. The eagle flies up in the air, his heart is proud, filled with despair. A broken flag hangs from his beak, he holds it high for all to see. Our states united once again, we'll show our colors to the end. So take your flags and hold them high, for all who live and all who died. Throughout the country, hand in hand, undivided we will stand.
More than 55,000 911 calls were fielded by the New York 911 Communications Division on September 11th. Those calls were then dispatched by the New York City Police Department, transferred to the New York City Fire Department alarm dispatchers in all 5 boroughs, or transferred to the New York City Fire Emergency Medical Dispatchers for life-saving medical instructions. While some callers pleaded for help, others instinctively knew they were making the last phone call of their life. The stories you're about to hear are compelling and give a view of what it must have been like to be on duty during the attacks of September 11th.
On September 11th, it just reinforced that regardless of how many alarms are sounded, regardless of how many calls come in, regardless of how many units respond to the scene, that 911 and public safety are actually the first of the first responders.
It was the most calls ever that we had ever taken. And there were some operators who were taking the 911 calls. Some of them were crying, and some of them, we had a couple people pass out because people were calling them. And like Russell Austin, he took a call, and there was a man on the phone with him. And the man said, the door is hot, this building is burning. He said, what am I gonna do? And Russell just kept trying to console him. You have to, just be strong. Just wait till the firemen get there. And the guy said, no, I'm getting ready to jump. I'm going to jump. What should I do? And then Russell said, you have to do the best thing for you. You have to do what you have to do. And Russell was about 6'7", and he just cried. He crumbled that day down to my size.
First phone call I picked up was fellows from Turner Construction, which were located in Building 1 on the B4 level, which is 4 levels below ground level. They were trapped. The pipes must have busted from the impact of the plane. So they had trouble getting out. So I called 2 units, Officer Davis and Officer Houston, to proceed down there. Officer Murray and Officer Majette were relaying information to me on the phone calls they were taking, which were basically tenants up in the upper floors that there was smoke condition and they couldn't get out. We explained to them that we have units on the way up. As far as Officer Houston and Officer Davis, they called me on the radio and said they had got those fellows out of the B4 level, and last time I heard from them, they were going into building 2, and that was the last I heard of them.
A lot of them were calling because they had no idea what was going on. You know, they had a smoke-filled office with no clue, you know, and having to probably be the last voice that they hear on the phone would be yours, you know. It's, you know, it wasn't a good one. I had another instance where one of my other coworkers had a caller, said, our office is full of smoke. What's going on? Had no idea what had happened. They wanted to open the window to get some air. We said, no, leave it closed, because if the smoke gets outside, it's gonna come into the office, and we don't want that. Just have your coworker sit down and relax. He goes, what happened? We have no way out. There's no elevator, no escalators. She says, well, an aircraft has just hit your building. The man just screamed. He had no clue. Probably during that process, he dropped the phone. Somebody else picked it up. They said, what's going on? She explained the same situation. Unfortunately, that's when, after a few moments, the line went dead. And that's when we realized that the tower had collapsed.
And we were getting reports of jumpers. We were getting reports of a partial collapse. And then the phones fell silent, and the radio went silent. This was when the first tower came down. And one of the fireboats, Marine Company 6, I believe it was parked in the Hudson River right along Battery Park City, came over the air, said, Manhattan, there's been a major explosion and a major collapse of one of the towers. I remember hearing somebody inside of a fire truck or an ambulance, I'm not sure which one it was, screaming for help. The building's coming down, my rig's being crushed, I can't breathe, get the Army in here, somebody help me. Luckily, we were able to find out where he was, get him off the radio so we could get more important radio traffic through, and I believe they got him out. It was, for lack of a better term, dead silence for a good 25 minutes. No phone calls, nothing. And that's when I looked up at the TV and seen the second tower come down.
And of course we had a lot of lookers that were across the street, or down the road, so to speak, 2-3 blocks away, reporting that people eventually they all started jumping out the window. So we had some really horrendous calls, and the people are stuck in there. They did it, they were emotionally overwhelmed, and a lot of them asked for a break and went outside and shed a couple of tears. But after a short break, they came back in and came back, and I was really quite proud of them.
These other calls started coming in of people saying there's smoke, there's fire, they're trapped, and simmered down until the second plane hit. Then it was all chaos. People were calling. I had a lady call saying that there's no stairs, and she was on the 87th floor, I believe it was, and at that point I didn't know what to say. There was no way to get to her, and she was crying on the line, on the phone, and I got very sentimental at that point. All of a sudden, the line died. And the second call I got was people untied the train stations, trapped, unable to get out, asking what can they do, are they gonna die? And that question really hit me hard.
Now people know the high-rise plan, what they're supposed to tell the people as far as the life-saving measures that they normally would tell people in a high-rise, and they didn't lose their cool. They stayed with it, and even though they recognized the voices of the people that were continuously calling back, and of course each time calling became more and more stressful and more panicky. Basically told them what to do, and stayed with them, so to speak, on the phone, and tried to control the situation, which I think was very good. We didn't lose our cool. It helped control the panic situation. Yeah. But the thing that hurt everybody is after answering these calls continuously, speaking to the same people, when the buildings came down, it was quite obvious to everybody that was in it that all those people that we had been speaking to for hours, for for an hour and 10 minutes, were lost.
Calls received from people that are literally reaching out desperately to the only thing they can reach out for at that moment in time, and that is 911. Not to report an event, which was very obvious, but instead to beg, to plead, to ask that loved ones be contacted that they have been unable to contact themselves, for spouses to be told that, not knowing what the outcome might be, to please tell my wife, my husband, my mom, my dad, my kids that I love them. And the kinds of calls that really tear at your heart.
Probably people calling here still want to know if somebody the family was on the plane. We had a bunch of numbers we were to transfer to, but it's still hard to have someone on the phone going, I haven't heard anything. I don't know if my husband or my wife or my child was on that plane. Who do I call? So you give them that number. Or you just have people calling up here that just need to vent or to talk, and they call us. So we need to talk to them about it until they feel a little bit calmer, and then you move on.
I did speak to some hysterical people that lived in high-rise buildings, and they saw things. Should we evacuate the building? Should we leave? And our best answer to them was whatever felt most comfortable to you. If you felt you needed to leave that area and go somewhere else, if you had another resident you could go stay with, whatever made you feel okay that day was what you should do.
Approximately 9:30, quarter to 10, we got a phone call at our 911 center from Cleveland Center saying that they had an aircraft that has turned around in Cleveland area and started heading back, and they had lost contact with it. So we were in a more of an alert mode now that something was going on.
The phone call itself wasn't very long. I think it was under a minute, long enough for me. There was no doubt in my mind, absolutely none. As soon as I answered the phone, you could just hear it. You knew. Definitely not a prank call. No, I never second guessed it to whether it was, legit or not. I knew.
We received a phone call from our shift supervisor that we had taken a call from Flight 93. We at that point determined that the Flight 93 had actually come and bisected our county almost in half and flew right over Westmoreland County from Allegheny County towards Somerset County. So we knew at that point that we are going to be running a risk of this plane, if something could happen in our county.
We got an airport up, close up on the ridge, and then when they start seeing a big jetliner like that come in, it's a little bit big for that airport, and they were just, screaming, saying, yeah, I got a low-flying jet, and then they're thinking that with the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, they were just calling in saying, I got it going down, and we had one guy call in, and he tracked it the whole way. He says, yep, it went down.
You know what's happening. You can tell from the voice exactly the terror that is going through this person and what potentially is going to happen on this plane.
Surely if you've done this, you hang up the phone, it's like, I've heard everything now. You will never hear that from me, never. Not now, anyway. Up until that day, it was, every other call was probably, well, I've heard it all now. Not no more.
Obviously the plane must have flown right overhead for us to even get the call. And shortly thereafter, you don't even know what to say. What do I say to John? He was upset, but he's a guy, tough guy. He's a fireman. And I thought, well, what the heck, what now? What do you do? Well, the phone started ringing, and again, you try not to think it's kooky people. And I picked up the phone, and it was an elderly gentleman who said, very calm, he said, I know there's a lot of things going on right now, and I'm sure you guys are getting a lot of calls, and I don't mean to be an alarmist, but I live in Somerset County, and I think I just saw a plane go down. well, this was right after John had taken this call with this gentleman on the plane. And it was like, holy cow, you know, it is in my backyard.
I took the first 911 call that our center received. It was a lady who lived near Shanksville. She, you know, described what she thought was not a regular plane that we would see in Somerset a lot at our airport. She described it as, you know, being very, very large, and it did crash into a field just outside of town.
Emergency line rang, 911 phone rang, and I just happened to walk out of the room to get a glass of water. And I come back in, and he looked at me and said, "We have a plane down." I said, "You're kidding." The yellow phone started ringing at the time. And we had almost every single 911 line ringing. They were rolling over to different lines. And he said that his caller indicated it was what she felt was a large jetliner. And I said, "No, you're kidding." I couldn't believe it, you know, for here. And so I took the third call, 911 call on it, and the lady was an employee at a salvage, I believe it was a salvage yard right next door to where the crash happened. And I kept her on the phone. She said she was walking down and try to walk down through the fields to see what she can see, any survivors, but she indicated it was a huge plane that crashed.
There was one woman who called, and she was elderly, and she seemed really confused when she called. And I said, "Well, you know, what's the problem?" And she just like paused for a minute. She said, "I'm scared."
Somerset County confirmed, you know, that the plane was down. I think I was actually on the phone with the FBI and trying to confirm whether or not, you know, the plane was still in the air or still, you know, or down. And Somerset confirmed first it was on the ground.
One of our supervisors here, their 911 coordinator at the time, had left to go out to the site. And I remember Alan getting on scene and telling us that there's nothing recognizable, there's nothing there. They can tell that there was an aircraft down, but they couldn't tell the size right away, and there was no survivors to help.
Fire apparatus, ambulances, and police officers from the Port Authority and the New York City Police Department responded to the North Tower of the World Trade Center to start their respective operations. What they didn't know was that United Airlines Flight 175 with 65 passengers and crew was heading toward the World Trade Center complex. Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower at 9:03 a.m. The voices of September 11th will share their stories of what they dispatched, the choices they made, and the decisions they live with.
My first thoughts within the first, I'd say, 10 minutes or so was this has to be an accident. It could have been, you know, a small commuter plane or even like a Piper Cub, a Cessna. Somebody just got a little too close and clipped the building. Had no idea it was a fully loaded Boeing 767 coming out of Boston. And then the second plane hit, and that's when I realized it wasn't an accident.
One of the traffic helicopters had zeroed in on the Trade Center, and I just turned to Mike, my boss, and I said, "Mike," I says, "I'm not even going to wait for Manhattan to call me. I'm going to start out Rescue 3 and the collapse rig, because I know they're going to be needed at this incident." And I did. I walked over to the voice alarm, which is a public address system, and turned out Rescue. I said, "Rescue, don't even wait for the ticket. Don't wait for anything. Just take the collapse rig and go to the Trade Center."
Commissioner Feehan was coming across the bridge with Chief Gansey, coming across the Brooklyn Bridge with Chief Gansey, the chief of department at the time. And Chief Gansey came over the air and said, "Manhattan, what do you have operating at the World Trade Center?" The radio dispatcher had said, "Well, we have a fifth alarm operating." okay, transmit an additional 5th alarm. We just had a 2nd plane hit the Trade Center.
I was basically just handling the radio transmissions and trying to situate people with, as the calls were coming in for triage. We had one officer that we lost was an EMT, and he had come from a job as a paramedic, and he was doing a lot of triage right at the Trade Center in different locations. So once they got one person moved, the sergeant would call him to come down because they had 3 more that needed to be triaged.
We sent equivalent to probably a 2nd alarm assignment. You know, we sent all our special units. In fact, they specifically called on the phone and asked for our Rescue 4s, Queens, and our Squad 288.
I received a phone call from the paramedics, MyCom, and they were mobilizing ambulances to respond to Liberty State Park in Jersey City. So I dispatched my one ambulance next door. The assistant fire chief was on it, and they were heading toward Liberty State Park to assist with the injured.
Liberty State Park was one of the initial receiving areas. We were trying to coordinate with the Coast Guard and the Waterway Ferry, because they were tremendous presence in New York Harbor on a regular basis, and they were very instrumental in evacuating people from Lower Manhattan into New Jersey. Jersey City happens to be the closest point to the World Trade Center, which made it practical for them. They just brought boatloads of people hanging on the sides of these boats to New Jersey just to get them out of Lower Manhattan. And that was even before the 2nd plane even struck the building. And that just changed the dynamics, because we didn't know, because there's high-rise buildings on the Jersey City side. There was no telling, nobody knew what was going on. The Liberty State Park area was used as a major receiving area for a lot of victims, and mostly people that were evacuated from Lower Manhattan.
We got the 16 fire departments in the area, and they started heading toward the George Washington Bridge for a standby, thinking if they were going to go over to the city to help out.
Trying to coordinate the effort with the mutual aid companies that are coming in, and just handling protection in Staten Island, and trying to, since I used to be a fireman in Jersey, I was trying to coordinate with them for radios and where they were going to go and trying to set everything up. And that's how I actually spent the 11th in Staten Island.
Later on that day, we were going to send a full rescue response, and we touched base with the New York City operations, and they weren't sure what they were. They were still regrouping later on that afternoon, not exactly sure what kind of resources they had left, what kind of personnel they had left, what they really needed. But they knew that we had a full rescue complement here. We had a rescue company, we had our squad units, we had support units all ready to go, and they knew they had that resource available.
There was a lot happening. We had 2 5-alarm boxes out at that point, another one on the way, units coming in from Brooklyn, units coming in from Queens. It was a lot to coordinate. Then when the first tower fell, we really had no idea what had really transpired at the scene, because we didn't have the TV on at that point. And we couldn't raise the field comm unit. We really had no idea what was going on. We were thinking maybe they're just too busy. We didn't know they were in the collapse zone.
Okay. Banana field com, Kate. Banana field com. 26 standby, banana field com.
My fire chief came over and said, I'm going to need a strike force and a task force to respond. That's 16 towns to respond to the George Washington Bridge.
Our units are responding to along the waterfront. We were massing a response to go into New York City in the first couple of minutes. We had the initial response with the Port Authority emergency service units. Requests from EMS, because right away the ferry boats in New York Harbor were bringing sick and injured and just evacuating that whole area and just bringing them to the closest point of land in Jersey City. And EMS was requesting our assistance with triaging, transporting, treating some patients, and getting them out of the downtown area, because we didn't know.
Attempting to reach the other boroughs to get units to come to Manhattan, both to go to the Trade Center and to relocate into the Manhattan firehouses, which were empty. And I was having a lot of trouble getting through, because, as you can imagine, all the phone lines were jammed. Took you up to a minute to get a dial tone, and then if you were lucky, you got through and you got a ring on the other end. The trunk radio system was also very heavily used, and was getting a busy signal trying to reach the other boroughs. It got to the point where we had to use our portable radio to call the other boroughs on their borough radio frequency.
The Port Authority Police has an emergency response plan, and we have 13 different commands or facilities that we deal with. And whenever we have a major incident, there's a plan in place for years that when we have to, we send people from each command to that location to help with manpower.
Myself and my partner were directed to get Queens units together. We decided, we looked at the boards, we picked the units, including a supervisor, and we had them go to the foot of the 59th Street Bridge and meet there. So if needed, they all could go in together as one caravan of units into the World Trade.
As I said, we were setting up 2 staging areas, one at Shea and one at Cunningham Park, where the old recall of all members were coming in with their gear, getting ready to go on buses and getting ready to be deployed down to Manhattan.
I found out that the 2 people that were on the field comm that we had were kind of concerned because we hadn't heard from them in a while, were evacuated to New Jersey. So I was into, making sure that they were okay, and they turned out that they were. And then we had other people that were down there working, so I wanted to make sure that they were okay. So I went down there, and it was a very, very difficult operation.
During the first night, the overnight, the New York City and Port Authority had our rescue crews trying to gain access to the lower level of the World Trade Center through the path subway tunnels. They got pretty well into the tunnels until it was flooded. They had to pull back out and get the scuba gear. And by that time, daybreak, and then there were imminent collapse of some buildings on the New York side where the folks were operating, and they pretty much pulled out of that until the next day or two, until they got the building stabilized on the New York side.
60 seconds before the plane struck the Pentagon, we received a report from one of the Twin Towers in Arlington that there was a fire in the building. Now, these Twin Towers, although they're very tall, at about 30 stories in height, they're certainly nowhere as tall as the Twin Towers in New York City. But a report of a fire in any high-rise building obviously gets the maximum level of response. So the alarm was sounded, and the units left their station. They were all in their station at that time of the morning, en route to the Twin Towers in Arlington. So literally half of our total fire department was committed to one alarm.
One of the motor officers came up and said that he had not seen an impact, but was seeing a lot of thick black smoke.
Just as we were getting the report from the police officer on patrol on one side of the Pentagon and the fire officer racing to the fire on the other side of the Pentagon, as fate would have it, they called back from the Twin Towers in Arlington to say that the fire had been extinguished. Right away, we sent one unit in to check, but we also had the good fortune of redirecting those units that were already on the road and would, had they been in their station, be first due at the Pentagon to begin with. The effect of that was that we were able to send, literally as a first alarm assignment, separated only by a matter of seconds, the entire complement of the Arlington County Fire Department as a combined first alarm, second alarm assignment. So what we did was proactively call our neighbors both in Alexandria, Virginia, at Reagan National Airport, in Washington, D.C., and in Fairfax County. Literally the 4 agencies and jurisdictions that surround Arlington, Virginia, told them what was obvious because it was on the news by that time, and asked them to send to Arlington a complement comprised of 8 engine companies, 4 truck companies, 4 ambulances, 1 chief officer, and a rescue squad. And we told them that we wanted them to stage in a position that would allow them easy access when the inevitable call for assistance was received from the incident commander. Recognizing that as this thing grew in enormity, that we did not want to have to go back to those agencies and ask for additional assistance as units were pulled from the staging area. So instead said to them that when they were aware that their units in fact were leaving the staging area and going into the Pentagon compound itself, that we wanted them to proactively replace their own units, negating the need for us to go back every time a unit was pulled in and ask for them to send one more unit.
We had a lot of interaction from other jurisdictions just saying, where do you want us? We had not only other jurisdictions, but other people that I've never had to deal with on the radio. I had no idea the U.S. Mint had their own police department until they came up in my ear that day. Supreme Court police, I had no clue. I didn't know they were out there, but they came up on my radio and told me they were there and said, where do you want us? And I just had them go direct to command because by that time we had incident command in place.
They were sending officers from EOD, Emergency Response Team. They were basically securing the monuments, which was U.S. Park. We kind of helped them. Requests came in through our line for our department to also respond. The fire board was notified. Our officers immediately closed down streets. Even though Capitol Police, U.S. Park, they were all on the scene closing down streets, we responded as well. We really worked together as a team, and really and truly, it had to be, or it would not have worked. Securing all the monuments is the U.S. Capitol responsibility, but it's also ours as well.
We have an alarm for the airport here in the county for a plane down. So we use that alarm. And once we had some units that got closer to the scene and they did say, you know, it looks like it could have been a very large plane, then we just, every ambulance that the county had, we just started sending people. There was no you know, dispatch procedure at that point. It was just, are you available? Go, you know. In Cambria County, neighboring county, they just started sending every ambulance they had available because, you know, the airplane could have had 300 plus on board.
On the initial dispatch and then the second dispatch, I think we had a total of 8 fire departments. Probably had 4 to 5 ambulance services. Police department wise, between county police departments, the sheriff's department, and the state police, we were probably looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 different police agencies that were coming into the scene. We also have a good working relationship with neighboring dispatch centers, so you know they were trying to help pick up the overflow that was coming in. Departments from outside the county were volunteering to send equipment into the county to cover the routine calls while our units were tied up out at the scene. So things just fell into place. You know, it seemed seamless. We sort of backed all the fire people off and set up a perimeter and started setting up a command post there on scene because by this time we had several fire departments on scene. We had different police agencies throughout the county. The sheriff's department was there. State police were on scene. So you know, we tried to secure things as best we could and get communications set up with the agencies that were involved and try to make some sense out of exactly what was going on.
We had dispatchers rotating in and out of the mobile command post. The dispatchers were manning the different radios for the fire, police, EMS. We were also taking requests from numerous different agencies, from the state police to the FBI, to the ATF, to the PEMA people. We were doing the resource work. If they needed certain items, whether it be boots, gloves, hats, you wouldn't believe all the stuff that they requested, but we would try to gather that information up as well.
It takes many months of training to become a 911 professional. Hard work, patience, decision-making, and dedication are just some of the skills needed to do the job. On September 11th, they needed to stay calm on the radio as units in the field were calling for help. Some of those calls for help included disoriented field units being hit by debris. The 911 call takers gave instructions to frantic callers. They provided pre-arrival medical instructions, and when asked, they took dying messages and even prayed with callers. Our very special voices will now share the many skills they used on September 11th. These skills will benefit any 911 professional in their daily job.
I've always been an advocate that the dispatchers and dispatch centers really are the most intricate part and probably the most critical link in accessing, the public accessing the service. The dispatchers are critical in making sure the proper information is acquired. As we all know, in any training class, they make sure you get the right information, the right call, route it to the right agency, and the dispatchers send the appropriate units. That's textbook. The things they don't teach you in these training classes is how instrumental and how important or what kind of attitude or anxiety level you can create to the units in the field. If the units in the field sense that dispatch is losing or getting excited, they're going to react the same way.
We are trained to become, take control of the call, okay? Listen to what they're asking, and of course our medical training always helps. Psychological first aid, calm them down, talk to them, okay? I guess try to put yourself in their position, you know, and tell them, you know, okay, well, we understand. Okay, we're gonna have somebody there for you. Just try to relax. Just bear with us. We'll be there.
Even the common phone call, I mean, I got a couple phone calls just from family members. And, you know, just that one extra minute that I took with them, I think really helped, you know, to calm their fears, to answer their questions, to even, you know, direct them.
The biggest skill was talking to people, because at that point, first aid wasn't really going to do nothing much. Just trying to calm them down, even if it was for the last hour, last minute, just talking to them and making sure they have some type of peace.
Most important thing is calm. To be calm on the radio if you're dispatching an event, no matter what it is. Because if you're hysterical or if you're excited, it's going to get the officers or the firefighters excited. They need somebody that they know can handle the situation and be calm and get the job done. Listening to people and callers and what they have to say is very important. You know, there's a lot of people that called in things that normally people wouldn't be concerned about, and after a while it might get kind of old, but you still have to listen to what they're saying. And
the fact that we are in the customer service business, the only thing is that we're not face to face with you, so we can take that deep breath after we give you reassurance and we get you through it. Once we get you through it, then we are able to make it through it. You know, it's like once you have handled the situation, you take a deep breath and then you continue on.
Being able to talk to somebody and maybe not have the exact answers that they're looking for, but be able to talk them down from being upset. It's not always the fact that you can give them a concrete answer that yes, this is what you should do, or yes, this is going to make the situation better, or you know, we have the answer. But just being able to, if they have no one, like an elderly lady or gentleman that has no family around or anything, just being able to pick up the phone and have someone to talk to and answer his questions that he doesn't know about, and to be able to know that that's okay to do those things is probably what helped me out and get through the day the best I could, because I don't think anybody really had any of the answers. You know, at that time in the morning, at 11 and 12 o'clock in the morning, nobody knew what the right answers were. So we were just evolving as the day was going on.
You know, people listen for your voice. When they hear your voice on there, you know, it's a comfort level. As far as the general public's concerned, I honestly think that they don't think too much about it until they need it.
A radio operation, which we always tell our people that there's 1,000 things going on in the office, but the only thing that they hear, the people in the field, are the radio. And the way you perform on the radio, the level of professionalism on the radio can and does have a big impact on the overall operation, because if we panicked on the radio, they would feel like we had lost control. They would get panicky possibly, and then we'd have a serious problem, not only in the office, but outside also.
Don't go crazy. Just sit back, do your job as a dispatcher, what you were trained for. This is my career. You know, this is my profession. I have to be professional at it. I have to calm people down that called that day, especially parents. The superintendent of public works wife called me, her daughter, you know, and then I got the call from her daughter, telling, and I know her very well, and she said, Eddie, can you get in touch with my dad? I'm on my way home. No problem. I got him on the radio. Your daughter's fine, she's coming home. I called his wife on the phone. So I made those little extra things to call people.
Better control of the incident command, setting up a staging area and a command post further away from the actual incident. In a case where you have something like that, like a large building, you may want to bring it back a few blocks in case there's a possibility of a collapse.
The incident command system. Keeping things in check and knowing who was in charge and instituting and staying with that chain of command on who's responsible for what, know your areas, your sectors, your department heads, and how the flow of information works. That was absolutely critical for us to be successful in our operation. We utilize the incident command system on every aspect, every call we go out on, whether it's a single engine response or two pumpers going out for a car fire to a 5 or 6 alarm fire. Incident command structure is in place, and it's a very rigid system here. We know exactly who the communication center contacts on the fire ground. They know exactly who they're going to call on the fire ground as far as operations or staging or triage or EMS liaison or your PIO person. Everybody was in place, and we stick with that. Incident command system is probably the one most useful tool that kept it all together for us.
Common sense, keep your wits. I mean, if you listen to the tapes and everything else, we're not excited. And I think if we start getting excited and blowing things or making things seem worse than they actually are, then it's just going to increase the anxiety and everything on the field forces. So by us maintaining that calm and coolness, we actually help the whole incident.
I use a personal technique we call the musical conductor in this room, the way it's set up, because you have to make eye contact with people, and when you stand up and you start pointing to do this and do that, you'll feel like you're conducting an orchestra. And that's a lot of ways what this was like. We had so many people in so many different positions, and call takers and monitoring different channels on the radios. We run just a simple 2-channel operation, but we had county radios, we had other agency radios with us, coordinating the different phone calls. And in order to make eye-to-eye contact, make sure the messages were received, you had to keep pointing to make sure you know who you were talking to, and you wound up felt like you're almost conducting an orchestra. But then it was still within that incident command type of structure, where you knew who was in charge. The dispatchers reported to the supervisor, reported to the deputy chief of communications, to the chief of the department, who interacted with the line chiefs, and down to the operational side of the department.
I took an interest in the fire department. I went out afterwards, off duty, and rode around and learned the borough, street by street by street. I went to fires. I hung around in some firehouses. I made it a point once I was a supervisor to try and get specialized apparatus over to our office, and they could drag out all their equipment and show the people that worked with me just what they can do.
So I mean, we're kind of that integral cog, that missing link. I mean, without us, who knows? I mean, we had the mutual aid, which was in a problem in itself. No communications, there again. But got to keep your wits. You can't, if you have to step off the platform, take a break, scream, yell, and then go back to what you got to do. Release that tension.
Just getting a real feel for the different equipment that they have, the different capabilities that separates one unit from another, and then being able to employ that. If I knew that people were loading up a 5-story building fire escape, fire in the rear, or loading up the fire escapes in the rear, being able to convey that information, being able to direct a particular company to the rear of the fire escape, being able to direct a particular company how to get to the fire. So, depending upon the severity of the traffic, you get companies from strange places and they don't have a clue how to get there. When they come back and say, okay, dispatcher, got you, and they pull up there in one piece, that's really nice.
Patience, stay in control,
You can't lose your head at the scene, and you can't lose your head at the radio and become emotionally involved in the situation. Then you're of no use to yourself, your partners, or anybody that might need help. So you need to take in the situation, but then step back, gain control, and perform your job functions.
Training to handle your job routinely, and if you do your job well routinely, you're going to do your job very well when the big one hits. And in fact, that gave immense pride to see people pull together and without literally any orders or directions being given, for people to know instinctively what to do and do it well, to do it efficiently, to do it quickly. People that think ahead, people that are proactive, and I have always promoted and preached to them to think strategically and act dramatically and act dynamically. Don't necessarily wait for something to happen, but think ahead, anticipate it, if you will. It's very important for somebody to step back and to look at the big picture and to be sure that everything that needs to get done gets done. And to do that in a cool, calm, collected fashion. And at the same time to ensure that you are keenly aware of what the call takers and the dispatchers are experiencing, as they are very, very intent on their particular area of responsibility. And to just be there for them, to put your arm on their shoulder and to tell them that they're doing a great job, to let them know that if they need a break, they can take a break.
When the second tower came down, I mean, it was just, you could hear everybody on the radios. They were, you know, it was just, it was all hell broke loose, you know, but you could hear the dispatchers in New York remain calm. The FDNY dispatchers, the NYPD dispatchers, even the surrounding towns. Nobody was yelling, you know, nobody was really, they were doing their job.
Mobile Command Center, we have firefighters from 4-engine responding to the location, all 3 members. You have members trapped on the west side of tower number 1. We believe it's Captain Fuentes. He's unable to give us his exact location. Reported to be several members trapped. Do you have that message and copy it?
10-4 Manhattan, I got it. I relayed it to Chief Blake. He was on his way up with several members, okay?
All right, 10-4.
I was there maybe about 2 hours doing different things, answering phones, relieving people. And then at one point I finally made my way to the decision dispatcher. That's where I wanted to be because I'm a bit insane. And I sat down at the decision dispatcher and I winded up being there, I think 3 to 4 hours. And it was like nobody wanted to sit there for obvious reasons. And I'm sick. I wanted to sit there for a while. And it was just amazing. People forget about the 2 1075s and all hands fires we had up in Upper Manhattan. Everyone forgets that we had, you know, a couple of fires where we said, okay, you've got, you know, less than your normal complement of people, but that's all you're going to get. Do what you can with it. And we just, you know, we have protocols and procedures for class 3 alarms, and it was like, okay, we have a class 3. It's a hospital. It's supposed to normally get this. Well, too bad you got 1 engine, and be glad you got that. And we never got, for that day, we never got stopped. We never got questioned. And it was hard as a dispatcher because we have our rules. We have to do our rules. We don't do our rules. We don't send what we're supposed to send. We're in trouble. And it's very hard to sit there with everything that happened and say, okay, throw the rules out. This is make it up as you go along, and if something happens, something happens. There's nothing you could do.
The Manhattan dispatcher that was on the radio was the Lightsey. He did an excellent job. He was right on top of things.
Manhattan, please send somebody! Okay, the person calling for help, listen to me. You need to calm down and relax. Stand by. We do have somebody on the way. You maintain air, get off the air. We do have somebody on the way over to you. You to remain calm. 10-4? 10-4, make over the truck! 10-4, we do have people on the way over there.
You have to remain calm on the radio, even though you see it's really getting bad. Remain calm on the radio. Keep track. Once you keep track of what's going on around you and what's going on over the radio, try to visualize what's happening there, and keep track of it. Once you keep track of it, you'll be able to save a life, which is very, very possible. And as far as the voices, yeah, of course, octaves go higher when it's really getting bad, but you got to remain calm. That's the main thing. And once you remain calm, you'll be able to handle it better.
How to prioritize, and how to really, I mean, I see it with some of the probies coming on, how to really listen on the floor. I mean, let's face it, what we do, it's 24/7, but we don't work 24/7. Let's face it, the phones don't ring every minute of every hour of every day. And there's fun times, we kick back, we watch TV, we joke around, we talk, we have conversations. But to be able to sit and do that and still have an ear open and listen to that radio, or that one phone call you take and listen with that one ear, we get commonplace. And that one phone call you take, and something about it, that's going to be a fire, you know, and not to lose that.
The best thing I could tell people to do is to anticipate something to go wrong and write that stuff down. This way you have it prepared for you. So if a chief comes up to you or asks you on the radio, do you know where this guy is? Oh yeah, he's over here. That's the biggest thing to do, to keep track and to keep your head together. Once you get that fear in you, you're never going to get it out of you.
In a case like that, you always have to be somewhat prepared, even though you can't be 100% prepared. Have something that, you know, change your clothes in your locker, or have another way to communicate, like if you know, because like here the phones were down. You need some other kind of way to communicate with your family, or for them to communicate with you to make sure that everybody's okay. So I made up a plan. Like I told my daughter, you know, your first thing to do is get to your brother, and then when you get to him, then you contact me. We're dispatching, and we can't be with our families if something like that happened unexpectedly. So at least have a plan where they could, you know, get in touch with each other and then get in touch with you.
We got the men out there, and we made sure where they were each time. My other partner and I, we just sat there, you know, we made sure where's our cars, where's our, you know, who's there, who's where. We had the list going. And then also knowing where the firefighters were.
For something of this magnitude, you'll never be ready. You can have the best pre-plan in the world, you can train, you can drill every day, but when something like this happens, everything's out the window pretty much. You fall back on instinct at that point. You fall back on your training and your experience, and then you go with the flow, as they say. Pretty much dispatching by the seat of your pants at that point. At least that's what we did.
It comes down to, you know what you're supposed to send. You have your assignment cards, and you just do what you have to do, and just keep going. And, you know, you always have help. There's never, you know, you're in a room with 8 people at any given time, 7 to 8 people at any given time. If you don't know an answer, somebody on the platform will.
I've lived in New York all of my life. I have not known any other department other than the New York City Fire Department. So to go out and see how other people operate in centers that are a lot smaller than ours and who don't do nearly the amount of work, it's like culture shock. And but the job stresses are the same. Regardless of the alarm level, the job stresses are the same. They still care about the people on the other side of the radio. They still have the same feelings as we do when something goes wrong or something happens on their watch. There are some things that are just universal.
To get emotional, I didn't have the time at that point. And not knowing what we didn't know. I mean, the guys on the outside had a better idea of looking at the building from the outside and seeing how bad it was. Didn't have a picture of it. And then, like I say, just about your business. You didn't have time to think about it because it was one thing after the other.
You know, you have to kind of like take a breath, maybe take a second, step back, and then go back to that mic. But you know, if you're calm, they're calm. You want to try to say, you know, this wasn't a normal fire. This was basically an attack. You know, innocent things were made into weapons. So it was, everybody was tested. Yeah, I don't think wherever this would happen, you would test the uniform force, the emergency responders, and the dispatchers. And I think every dispatcher, whether it's small or big, you know, town, county, city, I think they would do the same. We're trained, you know, and we deal with crises. We try to keep people calm on the phone, send the units in and get what they need, and I think everyone would basically do the best they could. I think we did the best we could that day in every borough.
When disaster strikes, that's the test of a dispatcher. I mean, I've done plane crashes, I've done riots, I've done everything, and but nothing like this. I mean, this was like one family. Nobody was hesitant to help and help each other.
I remained calm. I took the calls as they came, tried to make sense out of the ones that were not coming across clearly or people stepping on one another. And actually at one point even telling someone who was calling in to me to calm down and go slowly, give me the information, and so we could disseminate it to everybody else.
Paper and pen and a microphone, because in the end that's all it is. You've got to keep track of what's going on, and you got to be listening, and you got to respond, and you have to separate yourself a little bit from it. Not separate yourself where you don't feel and you don't get worried or concerned, but you got to say, listen, they can't do their job if we're not doing our job. And I'm not trying to sound self-important or anything like that, but everyone's got a job to do. Like, I'm not out there fighting the fires, they're out there fighting the fires. The police are out there keeping us safe, and you know, someone's got to be there to keep track of it all and help them do their job. And the biggest thing is you just got to pretend like it's every other day. You know, somehow you gotta just keep going. If they need, you know, public service, you gotta call public service. If they need, you know, an ambulance someplace, you gotta give them an ambulance. And you just have to keep doing it. And then at the end, you can, you know, take your time to be upset and to let it all register. But in that moment, you gotta just do your job. And that's what I think, you know, everyone here did. Everyone felt it, and everyone was concerned, and everyone hurt, but they kept it at bay until they had their time to let it out.
Battalion 3 to dispatch. We have a request from EMS on the scene. Can you deliver as many particulate filter masks as are available? We see Battalion 3. We'll see what we can do about that.
And this stay as calm as possible, because if I'm calm, my unit should be calm. If I lose it, if dispatch loses who's supposed to be in control, the units will lose it. And I didn't want that to happen.
Patience, number one. Number two, experience, knowledge of knowing your units and where they are sitting, usually where they stay when they're available, so you know that they're the closest.
You can sit back, take a deep breath, you know, and just go on and say, you can do this. You know, you're here, this is your job. You're here to help people, okay? And yes, we tend to sometimes take things personally, but we have to push that aside a little bit and say, if we can help the next person, there's another extra person we just helped, you know, and we'll go on and try to do the best we can.
It's very important for the call receiving operator to stay calm and talk to the caller and keep the call calm, because if the caller is excited, we're not going to get the proper information, and we might go to the wrong address or get the wrong information, send the wrong type of unit. The dispatcher, he has to stay calm. The dispatcher has to keep the units calm, have to send the units to the proper locations, have to monitor the call, make sure there's no hazardous warnings to warn the crew about, make sure there's no guns, no violence, no fire, no wires down. We've also got to monitor other units at the same time. So it's not just one person at a time we're dealing with, in my case in Queens, we have up to 40 ambulances that we deal with at one shot.
Because sometimes the radio air is, sometimes several units are talking at one time, having a keen ear for what each officer was asking for. So to really kind of like knock out the background noise around you and to pay strict attention to what they're saying, which streets were closed, which streets were open, and to be able to respond with every request that they wanted. So just having a keen ear, even now, even me, I said, what did he say? Repeat it. Don't be afraid to tell that officer to repeat that, because it could be a matter of life or death. So to really be able to listen.
Listen. You have to listen. You have to be able to act. You have to act now. You cannot second guess yourself. You need to work together. You just have to do it.
Now, I've been told by units on the field, if we have a professional dispatcher, things go a lot smoother. If we have a calm dispatcher, things go a lot smoother.
Probably the most important thing that you can learn as a new dispatcher is the ability to pay attention to everything that's going on in the room at the same time that you're paying attention to your radio, and then alternate radio channels as well. I mean, I teach my trainees to have that radio channel that they're responsible for in their ear, but then to also turn up unselected channels that relate to what they're doing. You know, if you're working as a backup dispatcher for the main primary channel, you need to be monitoring what's going on that channel as well as your own traffic, and keeping an eye on what's going on there, you know, so that you know what you're doing.
When something like that happens, you don't think about it. We learn to do our job regardless of what. You just do your job. Then when you finish doing your job, that's when you realize what's happened. But when you're doing it, you just do it.
Level-headed and being able to multitask and you know, not being overly sensitive because of the stress and the tension that was going on in here that day, that, you know, people might bark something out at you, and not to take it personally, but, you know, understand everyone else's feelings and emotions that were going on. But being able to, as a call taker and dispatcher here, being able to you know, remain neutral and do what needed to be done. It's a good job for anyone as long as you can have common sense, which is hard to put in a job application for qualifications.
You have to be yourself, for one. You're talking to another person on the phone, and you're their only lifeline, so you have to keep it together, and you have to try to get them calm to find out what the problem is and get them the help that they need. You have to try to, you know, keep your emotions intact, you know, and just do what you were trained to do, because it'll all come together.
Stay calm with everything that was going on. I mean, because none of us knew what's going to be next. You know, that was a big thing. And in the same token, being able to control the callers. You know, people wanted to be reassured. You know, and you didn't have all the time in the world to do that because the volume was so crazy.
Everything you learn every day, you know, from day one, how you do, you know, different dispatch centers do different things, but every single thing you learn, everything, at that instant, you better know how to do it. You better be able to think, you know, it has to be instant.
Answered phone calls, and when that died down a little bit, we tried to get things organized to, you know, to head out to the crash site and get things set up out there. You know, called to get cell phone towers set up and, you know, things like that.
Some people said I sounded calm, but, you know, that was the important thing. I kept telling myself, you know, just stay calm, you know, and one of the big things was getting the units there and the radio traffic and everything. It was real frustrating because, I mean, it's just everybody who had a radio, it seemed like they were talking, and you couldn't, it was hard to communicate with people, and that was the big frustrating issue, you know, just trying to stay calm and, you know, we'll get them there. And
most of it is stuff you can't be taught. We could teach people. We've had trainees that have been great. They know the county, they know exactly all the test questions, but you put them on a phone with a hysterical caller, and sometimes it kicks in, sometimes it doesn't. All I could say is it's just a matter of being able to balance, like I said earlier, that they need me. This is upsetting me, but you have to go on autopilot and just, it should kick in, and usually does. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've gotten rattled on many calls, but it just, something has to kick in that, you know, I'm this person's help right now. They are looking to me for everything. And although that sometimes is a lot of responsibility, you can't think about it right at that minute.
Take control of a situation and not let your emotions get in the way. Sometimes that's very difficult. Just knowing how and where to find information that you would need quickly. You have a lot of resources, but if you don't have time to sit down and think, where can I find this? you know, and in that kind of situation, it was nice to have been trained where I can go here, or I can ask this person, or I can do that.
Obviously every call that comes in the 911 center, for somebody it's an emergency, you know, whether we think so or not, for that person calling. And for something of this magnitude, of this nature, 9 chances out of 10 you're the last person they're ever going to talk to. In this case, you know, if it's a hijacking and a plane's going down, I mean, not many people walk away from plane crashes, so you need to listen. You need to talk fast. You need to be able to listen fast, because of course, if you can imagine, they're talking 100 miles an hour to get, you know, as much out as they possibly can.
If you took any basic call taker questions and thought about it a second, which John did, and he only had seconds to think about this, he asked the same questions that you would ask someone at a house to someone on a plane. What flight number? What's your address? You know, what's your name? What's your phone number? The destination, where you were going to, where you were coming from. You know, what city, borough, or township do you live in? So you just take those call-taking skills and switch on the fly to what you need for that particular incident. You don't have a lot of time. And while you're on the phone with that individual, you have to listen, not only to the caller, listen to what's going on in the background. Many times in our dispatch day, you hear things in the background that are not what the person on the phone is telling you. You hear the wife crying in the background when the husband's telling you everything's okay. You hear the child crying in the background when the mother's telling you her child just got hurt. So you have to listen and hear exactly what's going on.